This is the I Read Comic Books podcast, the very best comic book podcast for regular comic book fans. I'm your host, Mike Rapin, and joining me this week are two washed-up film actors trying to break back into Hollywood via an MCU movie, Kait Lamphere
Hello.
and Nick White.
I'm not going to be Chris Pratt.
Damn it. All right. Well, that's fine. We can still move forward with the show. Welcome back to another episode of I Read Comic Books. I'm very excited to talk comic books with everybody. I hope you were able to hang out with me and Danny on Friday as we were attempting to build the Batmobile. I very severely underestimated how much time it takes to build like a 500 plus piece Technic Lego set. And I was like, I'm going to get through like half of these bags in 3 hours. And it took me 2 hours just to get through 3 hours to get through 2 bags. It was a total mess. The whole video is up on YouTube. If you want to watch me and Danny kind of figure out how Lego works for advanced adults. But it was a lot of fun. Danny and I are going to try to continue to build our Batmobiles probably maybe next month or something. So look for an announcement about that. But for now, we're here to talk about comic books. I've got 2 legally mandated questions that I have to ask you. And that is, how have you been? How have comic books been? Let's start with you, Nick.
Sure. West Michigan Weather Watch, we're not out of it yet. I really, God, and like somebody revoke my Michigan status because like I very stupidly was like, I think we're finally done with winter. I think we did it. We melted all the snow. We're fine. And then we got like maybe an inch or 2 yesterday, and I was like, look at a stupid fucking calendar, Nick. It's February.
Right,
like you're not safe until maybe even June technically.
Right.
Accurate.
Like did someone shoot that freaking hedgehog or whatever they're called? What is he? Punxsutawney Phil? Groundhog. Did someone shoot Sonic? Did someone shoot him?
He lost all his rings and went back into his hole again. And now we have 6 more months of winter and Robotnik rules the world. Yes,
exactly. This is how you get kids in on the old traditions. You just got to update the image. Instead of Punxsutawney Phil, it's Sonic the Hedgehog now. Please.
Yeah. They just hold him up and he's doing the waving peace sign.
Eating a chili dog.
I saw this thing on Twitter like a month ago about Punxsutawney Phil, which, I mean, I prefaced this just because maybe this is all a lie and made up, but the article was like, did you know that one year they dropped him on his head and he died in like 4 days and there was a cover up that they like, I'm serious.
I
will go back and verify this. I should have gone back and verified it before we were recording, but now someone else can just Danny can proof this in real time and get back to us. But
please.
I heard there was a Punxsutawney Phil accidental death cover up. So
wow.
Well, that's what I got for you.
How does this tie into the book that you read, Nick? I know you read some comics.
Right. Well, what else have you been doing other than reading blatant lies on the internet? Which is like what a redundant thing to say. Just say you were on the internet.
Yeah.
Other than that, just been didn't have to shovel snow, but cracking some Magic the Gathering packs and simultaneously saying I am done with this and I am not done with this, and been marathoning the Halo show on Paramount, and it's surprisingly okay. And if you know nothing about Halo, probably actually gonna be an even better experience for you, honestly.
Okay.
I say that in a good way, honestly. I think that they've decided to unburden themselves from some of the encyclopedically boring lore. So Halo fans come at me. And I think it's for the better. So sometimes adaptations, do your own thing. There you go.
I was kind of hoping that, given that today, I guess I should have said at the top of the episode, we're intentionally trying to read books that tie into our Goodreads Book of the Month theme, which is comics, non-Capes comics that were adapted into movies or TV shows. I was half expecting you to maybe find some Halo comics, but you have something else, right?
Actually, yeah, that stuff is out there. But I think in terms of a segue, I think this idea of adaptations, do your own thing, I feel like there's been a movement in recent media within the last 2 or 3 years to sort of give adaptations sort of an acceptance or a freedom to kind of pave their own way or accept or reject certain parts of past lore or narrative. And certainly, like I said, I feel like I saw this in terms of the Halo show. Also this weekend, I watched the 2023 film Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem.
Hell yeah.
I was looking for how I was going to deal with the theme of this week, or how I was going to um, sneakily circumvent it. And I told friend of the show, Elle, I was like, I'm just going to read a Hellboy comic. Ha 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 ha. Going to read what I want and meet the theme and talk about Dave Stewart for probably the 9th show in a row that I've been on. And I'm going to get around this. I'm a sneaky boy. And she's like, well, what are you going to read? And I was like, I I'll read something that ties in with the new Hellboy movie. And she's like, well, what book is that based upon? And I looked it up, and she's like, are you going to watch the new movie? I was like, I don't know. She's like, maybe it would be a little irresponsible of you if you read the book and didn't watch the movie. And then I looked, and the movie was on Stars, and I didn't want to pay for Stars, and I didn't want to give them my email address in order to get a 30-day trial of Stars. So I was like, I gotta find another way here, folks.
Okay,
this is the path, right? This is how we got here. No one wants to know, but now you do. And so I was looking for something else, and I was like, oh yeah, that new Turtles movie is there. So and I heard good things, and so I watched the movie and thoroughly enjoyed the movie. If you haven't seen it, it's on Paramount. It's really enjoyable. If anything else, I feel like so many of these CG movies that are maybe not totally targeting kids but are kid friendly have kind of fallen into that Minions / Pixar kind of house aesthetic of like, this is what a CG movie for children should look like, can look like. And I feel like this movie really has its own strong visual identity.
Hell yeah.
It really feels like the original comic in terms of having a real scribbly, scrabbly, doodly, hand-drawn, like hard lines, quote unquote rough aesthetic that I really thoroughly enjoyed. I felt like it was very true to the source material. I mean, there were some things in there that were a little hyper topical that may or may not stand the test of time. Like one of them, like, Donatello says he modeled his driving after Forza Horizon. And I was like, okay, that will probably still be around in a couple years. And there's like a joke about Splinter needing someone to fix his Roku at one point. And I was like, that's fine. That's fine. But I really enjoyed the movie. Can't recommend that enough. In the same vein, I went back and I read Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: The Ultimate Collection Volume 1.
Damn.
I've read this maybe once before. I'm not so sure I fully completed it, but it had been a while, and getting to reread this book is always a treat anyway. This is written and drawn by Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird, with letters also by Eastman and Laird, and occasionally towards the end of the volume, letters by Steve. I assume that's Levine. It's written like Averil's last name, so I assume it's Levine.
Yeah.
He was a skater boy, and then they drew Ninja Turtle comics. So this was first published by IDW in 2011, and several years later, in 2018, they released Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Color Classics Volume 1, which, as the name suggests, are basically the same original comics, just published in color for the first time. For those that are really interested in this, and I know that there were at least one or two people on our subreddit, Discord, maybe like a month or two ago, that were like, oh, is there a reading map for this? How do I get into this? For those people who absolutely have to have color comics, I have read both. I think the colored treatment is fairly faithful to the era. I think it looks good. I don't think it muddies or covers up the absolutely fantastic pencils and inks. So if you have to have color, go right ahead. Both are fine. But personally, I still like the black and white. Yeah. And it's interesting to sort of compare the two. And what really shocked me, I think, the most is that I didn't remember or think that the Ninja Turtles' personalities would be coming through so strong in the comic so early. Like on page 3, they're like, yeah, Raphael can't wait to murder people. He loves murdering people more than the rest of us.
Yeah.
I was like, wow. And like at the beginning of the second issue, they've got Donatello like quietly, soldering a circuit board. And you're like,
Mhm.
oh, like they were laying some of these threads like real early. And I figured maybe some of this was maybe done down the line, or that it was part of like the TV show's attempt to like really make them visually distinguishable.
Mhm.
Because I think people, certainly my age, when we think about turtles, I think the first memory and maybe one of the strongest ones has got to be that animated series from the late 80s,
Yeah.
early
Yeah.
90s, where they've got the belt buckles with their insignias, and they've got the
Oh,
different
yeah.
weapons, and they've got the different color bandanas, and
Yeah,
there's a
yeah.
lot of different ways to really distinguish them from one another. And when you've got the original comic, it's in black and white, so the bandanas all look the same color.
Mhm.
The belt buckles don't exist, so it really becomes important to either and the other thing, which I think the animated series, the original animated series, in terms of like body shape and body type and body size, I think they were all identical. And then with some of the other shows and subsequent things that come along, including Mutant Mayhem,
Mhm.
the body shapes and size and height differ,
Yeah.
but that wasn't the case originally. So you really had to like look at the weapons in order to get an idea of who was who.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and then the personalities had to be established. So I was just really surprised. Full credit to Eastman and Laird, because I thought some of that was honestly the creation of the show or something that happened down the line. I did not think that they were sort of doing some of that so early. So,
Mhm.
um,
Yeah,
but
I
yeah,
I feel like when I went back and read some of this series, I think I did read this black and white classics edition. I think it was like, I'm sure the comics that are in this Ultimate collection are in that similar black and white Ultimate collection or whatever that I read.
yeah,
I remember being surprised by how fast the story moved, and like you said, how quickly you are to figure out who each character is just from how they're written, like just how their dialogue is written in some cases, and their interest in all this stuff. Like we clearly have the aggressor in Raph, we still have the leader
yeah,
in Leo and stuff. So it's, I don't know. It's funny to think, like, I agree with you, Nick, because in my head I'm like, oh no, those old comics, they definitely like were all generic, and then that got established over time, because I feel like that's how a lot of comic books kind of develop their characters, right? Like if you think of the original X-Men, or you think of like some, they're some of the older like Avengers stories, you don't really get like the strong personalities of some of those characters until much later. And it's like, no, Donatello, like the entire like TMNT group knew who they were from like the first issue of that story. And I think that's awesome.
yeah, yeah. It's also kind of funny because like in the movie, to very lightly tiptoe around the movie, right? The
Hmm.
turtles, they want to be normal. They want to go to school, right? They want to have the experiences that a
Hmm.
teenager has, because the movie really leans into this like wanting to be a normal teenager, wanting to be accepted, and the pressures that come with that,
Yeah.
within school and whatnot. And like that's what they really want. And Splinter is like, you got to stay away from humans, like they're terrible, they're gonna kill you, they're
Yeah.
awful. Like I just want to keep my little turtles safe. And in like in like the comic, Splinter's like, hey, like let's be honest, for the last 13 years, like I've been training you because I need you to go kill the guy that killed my master. Like I know that you're your own person and you've got your own wants and needs, but I'm on a mission for revenge. You are my tools. You gotta go kill this guy for me.
And they're
And I
like,
was like,
of course, master, whatever you
and
say.
they're like, this was the plan from day one, master. And I was like, this is a real departure from the movie. The movie is like, you're on your own journey. And the movie is like, you need to do what I tell you, okay? Because like I'm
Uh-huh.
your dad.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that was a real like real trip,
Hmm. But I
but
guess so you've read the comics, you watched the movie.
yeah,
I guess like,
yeah.
what do you think? Like, how do you think it compares? Do you feel like there is still a through line? Like, do you see how the original comics inspired the movies?
I think the movie really hit some of the broader points that it needed to hit. It
Hmm.
made them their own characters. I appreciated that. It was interesting to see them take the approach with April O'Neil, which was more in line with the animated series, where she's
Hmm.
like a newscaster, or she's involved in the news, whereas the original comic and then the IDW reboot had her as Baxter Stockman's lab assistant.
Right.
So she was actually more, tied up in the science sort of side of things. I thought, personalities wise, it was true to that. And some of the other characters and like the Utram Empire, and there's another character that gets revealed at the very end of the movie that I won't talk about. People can probably guess, but just watch the movie.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was really faithful, but was also just totally able to be its own thing. And I hope media just broadly continues to be willing to let things just carve their own path and
Yeah.
not just have to have this just terrifying like adherence to like, you either like walk the walk or whatever you're doing is just dogma, right?
Yeah. It'd be, maybe we'll talk about this in the post credits because I have a lot of thoughts about how TMNT can do that, but I think other franchises cannot. But that's a whole other
Yeah,
discussion. But
totally.
for now, I'm gonna bounce over to Kait. How have you been? How have comic books been? What have you been reading?
I've been good. I've been trying some new restaurants or revisiting some new restaurants. So I've had some really good food
Ooh,
lately. I went
nice.
to an Ethiopian restaurant, and then I got some takeout from like an authentic Mexican restaurant. And basically, this is the way that you should handle February. You eat some good food, you hibernate, you read comic books. A
Uh-huh.
plus.
I love it.
And one of the comic books that I read was Algerian, The Forgotten Women of the Algerian Revolution. Algerian is spelled like super French. So if you go to look it up, this is by Swan Morelli, De Lupi, and Ivanka Honenberger, who is the translator. And this is a bande dessinée. And I was at the library looking for nonfiction stories about women for like this Women's History Month special that we're going to be doing in March. Heads up. Look out for that. And I picked this up then. And this wasn't actually nonfiction once I started it, but it is heavily influenced by like real experiences that women had during Algeria's War of Independence back in the 1950s and 1960s. This was between Algeria and France. Thus the French comic book. And this follows a young woman trying to unravel her family's history. And she kind of like follows these fine threads of information. Like, she'll talk to one person and they'll be like, oh, talk to this other person. And that'll lead her to like hearing more of these stories. And those stories are what make up this comic book. And if that sounds familiar to you, you may have read the modern memoir, Algeria is Beautiful Like America, which was part of the reading challenge in our Goodreads group a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And so that's like this book, Algerian, is like an insightful look into the war that was referenced by that book. So this was kind of like get both of these books at the same time, maybe. Like I almost wish that I had done that. And so Algerian is like this anthology of stories, and they're all written to intersect with one another, but sometimes like you have to watch the background art to see where these stories intersect, which was really interesting. I really like the way that this was handled because it's not something that the protagonists of this book seem to know was happening in all cases. Like sometimes you would see characters from previous stories in the background, so you kind of have to like be on your toes and pay attention to the art. And this was a really good example of why I love comics, because like I don't know that I ever would have picked up a nonfiction or nonfiction adjacent book about the Algerian Revolution 70 years ago. But this is like, it looks like a pretty short book. And it has this really striking cover of this woman covering her face, and she's got henna on, but then you look at her sleeves and they're like bloody, and it kind of like all blends together and it makes this really striking, beautiful image. And then you realize, oh my God, there's blood. I do want to say that there's content warning here. Like the entire book is about war, so like all of these stories are a little hard to read, but the last story in particular is really brutal. There's like everything: assault, torture, violence, and if that's going to bother you, just try to skip it and get to the last couple of pages, because there is a really nice epilogue that kind of like ties this protagonist's story together and like revisits the reason that she went to Algeria to explore her family's history in the first place. So the end of the book wraps up very nicely.
Interesting. Yeah, I feel like if I saw this cover, because I just pulled it up, I definitely would want to take a look at that, but I'm right there with you. I don't think I would read a nonfiction-ish book about like the Algerian Revolution.
Right, yeah.
But this sounds cool. Like you've sold, I think that's like like what you said, this is why comics are great, right? This is what makes comics so interesting, is that they're able to attract us to stories that we maybe wouldn't have been interested about. I mean, like, let's look at like someone like Olive Box Brown's entire like bibliography of like, I mean, I love Tetris, so maybe I'd read a nonfiction book about Tetris, but I don't think I'd pick up a prose book about Andre the Giant. And yet here I am. Andre the Giant book is like one of my favorite things. I love how people are able to take nonfiction and in nonfiction-ish stories, right, and turn them into comics that can be really, really digestible without like losing the point that the stories are trying to tell. Like that's so fantastic. So I'm very much looking forward to that episode that's coming up in a couple of weeks. But so hopefully I'll hear more of those types of comics that you
definitely.
and the rest of the gang picked up. But let me talk really quick about what I've been up to and what I've been reading. I've been slowly but surely trying to rein back my Pokemon spending. I was on a cliff, the edge of a cliff the other night. I think I was talking to Nick. I almost bought like way too many cards because there was like I was trying to do a cost analysis in my head of like, how many card packs do I think I want to own, and how many card packs do I think I'm going to buy over the next couple of weeks? Could I just buy them all in bulk and save myself money? And then I kind of backed down from that because in my head I was like, that's just a lot of Pokemon cards to have in my house. And then I went out to dinner last night with some folks, and now they're trying to convince me also to get into Magic by lending me Commander decks so that I can start to learn. And I was like, I cannot go down two paths like this. It only leads to ruin. But other
Where
than
you're
that,
going, I can't join you. It's
But beyond that, I've been reading Naruto, been catching up on that. I'm like 20 chapters in. We'll see. Maybe I might have to do a Naruto episode sometime in the future. But the book that I want to talk about this week is Blue is the Warmest Color. This is a comic that was published in 2010, and then it was made into a movie in 2013, so it fits right on the theme. I did not have the ability to watch this movie because it's like not streaming anywhere. I looked this up because I wanted to get a book that was a bit off the beaten path, right? Like there's tons and tons of lists out there of all these different comics that have been turned to movies. Like I have considered rereading Two Guns so I could talk about that because that got turned into a really weird movie.
Yeah.
But I decided not to. So I decided to pick up this book, Blue is the Warmest Color. This is by Jules Moreau. It was originally published in French. This is a really, really sad comic. I do just want to say that. There's I'll put a content warning out here at the beginning. There's some sudden medical issues that kind of define the entirety of the book. But the story is it's set in 2008, and it follows Emma as she reads from the diaries of her recently passed girlfriend Clementine. From the start, we don't really know much beyond there was some contention with her girlfriend Clem, her parents, I should say, and Emma's presence in their home. But Clem's mom makes sure that Emma gets Clem's diaries because that was one of Clem's, like, aka Clementine's, like, last request before she passed, was make sure that Emma gets these. So we dive into Emma's life through personal narration, her journey from unsure sophomore in the French equivalent of high school, who's in love with a boy, to a senior in high school, fighting with feelings for an older woman and uncertain of like who she is in terms of her sexuality and gender identity. And this all takes place like in the 90s. So the story takes place in 2008, but it flashes back like a decade or so into the mid to late 90s as Emma is like talking about her life's journey through this diary. And this is all just the beginning of the story where Emma is kind of going through life trying to figure out who she is in her senior year. And Clementine is trying to figure out who she is through her senior year. She meets Emma, who is this older woman. And it goes from there. I really don't want to say much else because it's a very roller coastery kind of story of what does Clementine actually want? Why is Emma treating her the way that she's treating her? How did they end up getting together in the end? Because clearly they were a couple enough to have Clementine give her diaries over to Emma. And it's a book really, really about love. Like as sad and brutal as it can be. And there is some bits and pieces about like self-discovery. It's really a lot about love and like the trials and tribulations you go through as a teenager through your high school years and trying to, especially when you're living in the time like the late 90s and you're queer and that's not really a thing that anybody really accepts in France. So how do you try to be true to yourself without pissing off your parents or just being openly stared at or insulted in public if you're holding hands with another woman if you're a young woman. So yeah, I I don't know. It's a very, very strong book. It's like 160 some pages, and it broke my heart. Like the last dozen pages just like tore me in half. And I was like, oh, this is kind of a sad book the entire time, because we know that Clementine passes for whatever reason. That's why Emma is reading her diaries. But the lead up to those final moments in Emma and Clementine's like relationship really knocked me across the head. I did not see the bit in piece that like finally set me over and to start crying as I'm sitting here in my desk or sitting here at my chair reading really coming. So it's very interesting, very good in terms of just like very good storytelling and like getting you attached to characters in such a short amount of time. I really can't speak though too much to the art, because the copy that I was able to like get digitally through Hoopla was really not like, it was really blurry, and I can't tell if that was intentional or not. Like there were pieces of words missing, and I couldn't tell if that was intentional, like stylistically intentional, if there was supposed to be a lot of blurring because it's supposed to be like a reference to a memory or something. But it also just looked like a lot of really bad digital artifacting. So I think I want to check this book out like in a physical form just to like see what the actual art looks like. Like for what it was, reading digitally was fine. I could tell who the characters were. I could see what was happening, but there were just like some spots in the book that were just a little blotchy that didn't feel like natural watercolor. Because this book it's like digital lines and some watercolor. There's some really interesting things that happen with color here, but I feel like some of that was kind of put out for me because of this weird digital artifacting thing. So I'd really like to check out this comic in person to see what it looks like. But overall, it was really good. I think it gets across the emotion that Moreau was trying to get across in this book about self-discovery and like how love is such an impactful and powerful thing for two people, even with the short amount of time that they could have together. So I don't know. I really like this book. I have a feeling that the movie would probably, cut me in twain and make me cry out my eyes. So very much looking forward to watching that if I can find a copy of it. Like it was available on Canopy, but I don't have access to Canopy. So that's, maybe one day we'll get there. But anyways, blue is the warmest color. If you want something that's gonna make you cry a little bit, I recommend it.
I did happen to read this in print just like 3 weeks ago.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay.
And I think that it must have been a bad digital copy or something that you were reading, because I mean, like the art is like the use of color in the art is very intentional. You can tell, like you can kind of tell that from the cover with her hair being blue. So there's like these splashes of art through the book. And in terms of like the lettering, I think that the font that they used, because it was like a journal style, like that made it kind of hard to read. But I don't think that anything was missing or blurry,
Yeah, like entire like letters would just be missing. So I feel like there's just like a bad scanning or bad transfer over. So I don't know. Like I said, I'll definitely have to pick up a physical copy of this from the library or something just to see it, because I would really like to have a full picture of this book in my head instead of this like JPEGified like awfulness that I read. So weird stuff. But anyways, Kait, I guess, what were your thoughts on this book before I move on? Did you like it? Did you get the same vibe as me? Am I just like a weenie who just can't stand here when people die and things like that?
I gave it a 3 out of 5, so I think that I'm right there with you. Like I can see, I remember, I think that this book came out like since I've been into comics. Let's see, 2013. Yeah. Okay. So that's right. And I remember that it was like this big deal when it came out. And I've kind of been avoiding it because I heard that it gets a little explicit at times, which I didn't really think was all that bad in terms of what else we've seen in comics before.
I was gonna say, if your definition of explicit is like two half-naked women kissing, like I don't know, like I've seen much worse stuff in comics published by bigger publishers. Like I don't know.
Yeah, so I kind of like avoided this for a little while, and I mean, it was good. Like I enjoyed the self-reflective nature of the story and how you kind of get the perspective of two different characters about the same experience. But yeah, it was kind of a bummer, and it was like the end of it was very sad, and there is a twist in there that you don't see coming, even though you kind of know how it's going to end based on how the book begins. But yeah, it was very sad. I needed to read something else afterward.
Oh, dude, I will say that was the other point that I wanted to make is like I finished that book and I'm sitting there and I'm like literally like wipe my eyes and I open up my comic reading app and I immediately open Transformers 5. So like, just emotional whiplash. So it's like, this very sad story about these two women in love. And then we gotta save the Transformers, and Optimus Prime is just blowing people up with a giant rocket.
I think I started a romance manga after this, and then I read all 7 volumes in like 4 days.
Hell my God! Wow.
Hell yeah. Well,
Mike picking books like this, it just always makes me think of like the "Who Killed Hannibal" gif, because like Mike keeps picking these books and he's like, "Why does this keep happening to me?" And then he just picks another one and he's like, "Why does this keep happening?"
Right. It's me firing on me. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, let's move on. Let's talk about comics that we're looking forward to reading next. Hopefully some that aren't necessarily going to break our hearts. But I do want to shout out some of the folks hanging out with us live on Discord today. They sent over their top of their pile picks because they're on Discord and we notify. If you're interested in doing that, you should join the Discord. And when we at everybody to say, hey, what's on the top of your pile, you should send it over and you can get a shout out too. Hugh this week is reading Rise of the Powers of X #2. Danny is reading Ultimate Spider-Man #2. Big Marvel heads out in the studio this week. But I guess let me kick things back over to you, Kait. What's on the top of your pile?
Yeah. So it's another bande dessinée, another French comic. Third one this episode.
Ooh la la.
This one can't be sad, right?
Yeah.
Right?
This is The Old Geezers by Wilfred Lupano and Paul Couet. And this was actually what I was trying to get for this episode. This was the book that I wanted to read that has a screen adaptation. It was mentioned by a user called Evil Black Sheep on our Goodreads group for our February theme of non-Cape books with screen adaptations. And so The Old Geezers follows 3 men who are friends, and it kind of like follows how their lives and their friendship change over the years. And there's 2 timelines in it. And that's in the 1950s when they're young, and then like modern day when they're old geezers, like the title. And I never really got into this like subgenre that we've seen of like kids getting into trouble, or like sometimes you see outlaws or like anti-heroes. Not super into that kind of story, but boy, if they are mischievous old folks, I am here for it. Interestingly, there was only 1 copy of this book in all of Michigan in the Melcat Interlibrary Loan System. So I'm still waiting on this book, even though I put a hold in like 6 weeks ago. It's coming. I'm always interested to see where these books come from. Usually if it's a bande dessinée, it's like a university press or a university library. This is coming from Traverse City, like the tourist destination of Michigan.
There's one cultured kid who lives up in Traverse City who's reading bande dessinée.
Yeah, exactly.
He's got the ear of the librarian that, picks the books that they pull in, and
you got to remember, up in Traverse City there is that fancy art school that's up there, right?
Oh, right.
The little Juilliard light that they have up there that supposedly Lady Gaga went to or something. I don't know. Interlaken, that's what it is.
And now that I'm thinking about it, there used to be like a French fur trade up in northern Michigan, and I wonder if that kind of intersects with this whole bande dessinée French comic situation. I'm very interested now. I gotta call this library and be like, why do you have this book?
I'm building a corkboard as we speak.
Yeah, that's perfect.
So the movie, I wanted to mention that the movie is called Tricky Old Dogs, and it is in French. So if you only speak English, you're gonna want subtitles, or if you don't speak French, rather. And this is available in the U.S. through Amazon Prime. And I watched the trailer for this. I do intend to watch the movie after I read the book. This movie looks like just an absolute delight, like comedy about these 3 older gentlemen getting into a whole lot of trouble.
Here's the thing, Kait. I'm going to direct you to a movie that came out almost over 30 years ago called
Bad Grandpa.
Grumpy Old Men. Okay. I think there's a sequel, and I guarantee you, if you watch the trailer for this, you've seen this trailer before and went, I don't think I would ever watch that, because it's just couple of old men just being assholes and getting away with it. So I don't know.
It's Johnny Knoxville, and he puts on these prosthetics.
No, that's a different movie, Nick. Come on. Anyways, Kait, well, if you watch this movie, you have to let us know what it was like, because this does look very, I guess I'll say, jovial. How about that? Just from the posters that I saw. Well, let me talk about books that a book that I'm reading next, and that is Steins Gate Zero Volume 1. I'm going to apologize in advance. You can probably just skip past this. We've got timestamps in our show notes. You can just skip past here. But Steins Gate is one of those stories that like itches my brain in a really weird but good way, because it's all about time travel with some really overcomplicated, made up sciencey bullshit featuring nonstop Deus Ex Machina time travel stuff. Like, and I just can't get enough. Something about it makes me go, hell yeah, this is the kind of stupid sciencey comic that I want to read. And for those of you who maybe don't remember from a previous episode when I talked about this series, the original story is about a guy named Rintaro Okabe. He calls himself like a mad scientist, and he sends a text message to his friend after he sees the dead body of a person at this like science convention. He sends a text message to his buddy. He goes home, and it turns out that his buddy didn't get the text message until like the previous day. Like, he essentially sends a text message back in time, and he doesn't understand how that's possible. He ends up saving the life of this woman. Her name is Kurusu Mikase, and that was the woman who had died. And he falls in love with her. The world changes though because of this text message, and he and his group of scientists that work in his rogue scientist lab realize that they can send text messages and other pieces of information back in time, and it changes what they call the world line. There's this whole branching path theory about like there is a single moment in time that all things branch off from because of this one text message that our main character sent, and the story goes bonkers from there, because as Rintaro is constantly trying to fix all these different bad things that keep happening through these text message time travel things. Other people start sending text messages. There's mysterious characters. Somebody travels from the future in a spaceship that was potentially related to Rintaro, or turns out maybe it's not. A lot of weird things happen, and the story ends up pretty sad at the end, because you can't change time. That's basically what it comes down to. But there is this alternate potential path that the world can take in these timelines, and the story of Steins Gate Zero is one of those alternate paths. It is the beta world line, whereas our main story followed the alpha world line. This is the beta world line. And the story follows, it takes place in 2020. The original story took place in 2010. And Rintaro has given up. After suffering through indescribable grief and untold heartbreak, he gives up on saving the girl he loves, but one day he meets her again, just not as he knew her. From this chance encounter, the gears of fate would begin to turn once more. I don't know. All of the heroes and all the people from Steins Gate return. If you look into Steins Gate as a series, there's like video games, and the whole entire story is based off of a light novel that got turned into a TV show, and I read the manga, and so I'm reading like the third hand storyline here that is then like a secondary story to the main line. I'm way in it, and I haven't played the video games yet, but I kind of just love this storyline, and so I'm really, really excited to see what the hell even happens here. There's the original Steins Gate was like this big collected edition that I read in a couple sittings. I have volumes 1 and 2 of Steins Gate Zero, and I don't know if there's more. There might be a third. But yeah, I really liked the anime when I watched it, and I'm very excited to read whatever this beta world line thing is. So who knows? Maybe I'll start wearing tinfoil hats and try to send text messages back in time to make myself rich. Who knows? We'll see. Have you guys heard of this at all? I don't remember. I think Nick, you and I talked about this a little bit, but have you heard of this at all?
Yeah, I mean, I bought what I think is all of the original run.
Okay.
I still haven't sat down and read it.
Okay.
I flipped around through it. I will admit, like, I think the original manga ran maybe in like the mid-aughts. I think like 04, 05, right? So my problem, at least with it so far, just from skimming around it, is like thematically, I like the idea. The art style feels very, again, from someone who's not an expert on manga, like it feels a little dated.
Oh yeah.
Like
it's of a specific time.
It's
for sure.
of its time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's kind of my one little setback with it. Otherwise, I think it I think it gets into some of I think we talked about it gets into some of like the conspiracy theories about like, oh, this person was posting on Reddit back in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
Like, were they really a time traveler? Were they not?
That does factor into the story, which I think is very funny.
Right. And this guy's like, oh, I'm from the year like 2020. And I was like, yeah, that sounds maybe impressive. But like, if you would have asked me in like 2002, like, could I make a couple decent projections about 2022?
Mm-hmm.
I probably would have done okay.
Yeah,
like,
sure.
Maybe I'm, overestimating myself here, but like, come on. I don't know. The internet gets faster and we use it for stupid things.
Come on, Nick. We use this.
Come on.
It's very important. Okay, we don't use it for stupid things.
Speak for yourself.
Well, Nick, if you do go deeper into this story, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. But I guess let me bounce over to you then. What's on the top of your pile this week?
Yeah, I'm sure this won't surprise anyone, and it feels a little on the nose, but I am very cautiously interested in this book. And maybe that's appropriate that I lead in and say it's a Marvel book. Surprise. This is Alien, Black, White, and Blood, #1. If you're rolling your eyes at the title, join the club. So this is an anthology.
Mm-hmm.
It is going to be 4 issues, or 5. I think it's 4. And the structure that they're doing is that there is a story that will span all of them. It's a generation-spanning narrative, and that will be written by Colin Kelly and Jackson Lansing, who some of you might know from, what was the name of their Boom series, Joyride?
Okay.
Or I know they've done a bunch of stuff for Marvel. I think they've done some stuff for DC. I know them because I think they're the main architects behind the IDW Star Trek reboot. I know that they're certainly the pair that are writing the main title of the latest Star Trek iteration from maybe a year, probably 2 years ago.
Gotcha.
And then and that has art by Michael Dowling, who I guess has drawn Black Cat and Amazing Spider-Man. Again, like, apparently has done a lot of Marvel stuff, so I really can't speak to Michael's work. But so they're going to have this series of stories that stretches between all 4 issues, and then along with each one of these installments, there will be some little one-off stories from such creators as Ryan Cady or Caddy, I'm not sure, Stephanie Phillips, and Paul Jenkins, amongst others. The Alien Wikia page pointed out that this will be the first Alien title published by Marvel to have a subtitle. So here's the meaningless accomplishments, right?
Yeah.
Here's the stupid fucking little, benchmarks. But I thought about it, and I suppose that if you renumber all your books 3 or 4 times a year, Marvel might know a thing or two about meaningless firsts.
Yeah,
so, Marvel has done this black, white, and red thing before. It did this with Wolverine in 2020. It did this with Darth Vader in 2023. Apparently this time they were like, well, what if people don't know what the red is? So now it's Black, White, and Blood. Nothing like respecting your reader's intelligence. So yes, I'm cautiously optimistic. There are some names here like Kelly and Lansing, I can respect. I think Paul Jenkins has been a hit or a miss for me, but when he hits, it's pretty good. Stephanie Phillips, gets a lot of hype. I've read a couple of her things. For me, her stuff is fine. It's not, I'm not going to go out of my way to pick it up. So, yeah.
But the art, I saw the art preview for the book that she's on, and the art looks incredible. So that'll at least be worth it for that reason, right?
If anything else, it's Alien and it's an anthology, and these days, you just you gotta support anthologies when they happen, because if you don't, it's just another vote for people to never do anthologies again, and I think that's too bad. I'm more excited for the upcoming Alien book that's following this, which is Marvel attempting to wring every dollar and bend every IP to their will, which is that they're going to do, and I hate myself because I want the book, hate myself a lot for that, they're doing an Aliens What If series. I know, right? Yeah.
Oh, they got you, man. They got you in a fucking stranglehold, man.
Exactly. They've, and it's gonna be what if spoilers for a 1988 movie you all should have fucking seen.
Sure.
Spoilers. What if Paul Reiser's character doesn't die in Aliens but escapes, and Paul Reiser is co-writing the issue with some of the other Alien producers and his son. And yeah, if that sounds a lot like the J.J. Abrams thing where he like wrangled it so he could get his son to write a Spider-Man book, fuck you. This is going to be totally different. I know this looks like nepotism.
Listen, Nick, I'm very excited to hear what you have to say when this book actually comes out. I do want to say, Danny pointed out in the chat that Marvel has done this black, white, and blood thing a couple of times because black, white, and red is like a DC thing. They did that with Harley Quinn and I think maybe some other stuff. So Marvel's trying to be a little bit unique. They're not completely insulting their readers. I'll just say that.
Interesting, because I thought I said that they called it red with the Wolverine and the Darth Vader, and then they changed it to blood. But I will have to get back to you on that.
Yeah,
but we'll see. It's interesting to see between this and the What If that they are very carefully trying to put all of the Marvel, like, how can we, all of the different like Marvel staple wring extra dollars out of things into this. Because as I've said before on the show, up to this point, they've been doing Alien and Predator books now for maybe 2 years, and it's never really felt up until this point like they were like, oh, we got to find more ways to make more money. Up to this point, it was like, we did a Predator series. We did an Alien series. We haven't even done an Alien versus Predator series yet, guys. Like,
here's the thing. They went all in on the High Republic stuff, and I feel like that very much backfired. So now they have to reconfigure how they're going to do some of their other IP. And maybe the execs, I'm putting this in very heavy quotes, over at Fox are handling things a little bit different than on the Disney side. Now, even though they're all under the same umbrella, but like, inter-office politics bullshit. Who knows?
Yeah. I can't help but feel like, and this is like, I don't think this is a real leap of logic, that maybe some of this IP proliferation and escalation probably has to do something with the fact that the next Alien movie, I believe it's called Romulus, and I think it's coming just to Hulu. The next Alien movie, as well as the upcoming Noah Hawley, the guy behind Fargo, and Legion, he's doing an Alien series, and I believe that's coming out 2025 at this point.
Romulus,
maybe 2024.
Yeah, I'm looking it up right now. It's labeled as 2024, and according to Men's Journal, Alien Romulus shocks cast with, quote, disgusting scene. So who knows? Yeah. It's going to be great.
Right, that's the movie I think is coming out this year, and then the Noah Hawley show I think is next year.
Oh, the show!
We'll see.
Sorry, I misheard you.
Yeah, we got two properties on the way, and I mean, if you're an Aliens fan, you're probably hoping and praying that one of them is good. So,
well, I'll wait till Nick's next Aliens Corner to talk more about this. But I think to wrap up the show, I just want to say thanks for listening. Thanks to Paul for being here. Thanks everyone hanging out with us on Discord. And until next time, comics are good, and so are you.